Using the Startup dialog box, I've gone for a Start from Scratch option and gone for metric. My standard setting in the United Kingdom is metric millimetres normally. You might use imperial, you might use feet and inches, you might use metres. Most of the drawings I'm going to be working with on this course will be metric millimetres. Now what we're going to look at is setting our limits. Now the reason we need to set our limits is because the model tab, the model space that we draw in, is infinite. So what we're going to do is we're going to bound an area of that infinite space by coordinates so that we know where we're working. And what we'll look at there is the ability to utilize our zoom commands in the next exercise to change our limits and change how we zoom in and out. So if I draw a rectangle, say just in the middle of the screen here, I'm going to click on rectangle here, come into the drawing area, and I'm going to specify a first corner point there. We're at 207. So what I'll do, I'll say 200, 200. So that's 200 millimeters along the x-axis to the right, and then 200 millimeters up the y-axis. Press enter, and there's my rectangle there. Now it's going to be quite a small rectangle. I'm going to make it, let's say, along the x-axis. Let's make it 75 millimeters. And then press the tab key. And then height-wise, I'm going to give a height of 25 millimeters and press enter. So there's my small rectangle. Now, that started that bottom left corner at 200, 200. So if I just pan that down there by holding the wheel and moving the mouse, that bottom corner there is actually 200, 200 by way of millimeters and coordinates. Now, let's say that I need to specify some limits here. And I need to work with that rectangle in the bottom left corner of the limits I'm working in. So I type the word limits and press enter. It asks me now, do I want to reset the model space limits? Now that will come up because I've got my dynamic input on. Look at the command line at the bottom of the screen. Same process, specify lower left corner. I'm going to make that 200, 200, like my rectangle, and press enter. Then it'll ask for the upper right corner of the limits. Now the upper right corner of the limits I'm going to make 1000 along the x-axis and then comma and then 1000 up in the y-axis and press enter. Now I've set my limits there, so basically now I have a 1000 by 1000 space, but do I? I've gone from 200 200 to 1000 1000. Basically, my limit now is 800 by 800 because I haven't made that lower left corner 0, 0. That's basic mathematical coordinates. So I've set my limits there. Now, let's have a look at how we zoom in Autocad. I'm going to go to the View tab here. And what you'll see, you've got your Navigate panel here on the View tab. If I go to Zoom and click on the flyout there and do a Zoom Extents, it will zoom to the extent of the visible drawn objects, my rectangle with its bottom left corner at 200, 200. However, if I do a zoom all, watch what happens. It zooms now. Notice the rectangle is there, albeit very small, but I've now got my 1000 by 1000 bounded space in the model space. What I've done there is I've closed down my infinite space to a bounded space that is bounded by those limits that I typed in. So the bottom left corner of my limits there is the bottom left corner of my rectangle at 200, 200. And you can see there, if you look at my coordinate readout bottom left, I'm roughly at 200, 200. If I go right up here, can you see as I come up to the top there, there you go, I'm nearly at 1000, 1000 there. Not far off. Let's move it a little bit more to the right there. And that's the other corner of my limits there where my crosshair is, ballpark. I can never get it exact because AutoCAD is too accurate. So, zoom extent will zoom to the extents of an object drawn, regardless of its coordinates. Zoom all will zoom to the extent of your limits that you've specified by typing in those coordinates when you type the word limits and press enter.